Now we go straight to Ghana. On March 6, 1957, Ghana, which was formerly known as the Gold Coast, made history as the first sub-Saharan African country to gain independence from its European colonization rule. Now, Kwame Nkrumah spearheaded this movement and was a significant power player in leading the West African country, or the West African culture hub, if you like, out of its colonization from British rule. On Monday, during this year's celebration, President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo gave a speech where he started off by thanking, the dignitaries in attendance before praising the efforts of Ghana's four leaders who paved the way for its independence. News Central's Perpetua Fasomi Peter, in this report, gave an overview of the country's recent economic standing. Do watch it.
Ghana's rapid growth, printing 7% per year between 2017 and 2019, was halted by the COVID-19 pandemic, the March 2020 lockdown, and a sharp decline in commodity exports. The economic slowdown had a considerable impact on households. In the first quarter of 2022, the overall GDP grew by 3.3% year-on-year, down from 3.6% over the same period in 2021. Over the first half of 2022, the fiscal deficit reached 5.6% of GDP, well above the 3.9% target for the same period. Revenues underperformed as the flagship e-levy was introduced late and faced major implementation challenges. Inflation rose to 31.7% year-on-year, being an 18-year high in July 2022 from 12.6% at the end of 2021. The trade balance was in surplus as of end June 2022, thanks to high oil and gold receipts, but the overall current account recorded a deficit of 1.5% of GDP due to investment income outflows and net services account payments. Owing to the gloomy situation on July 1, 2022, President Nana Akufo-Addo was forced to announce that the country would again seek financial assistance from the International Monetary Fund, IMF.
Today's announcement is a major policy step that the government is taking over the short period to restore macroeconomic stability, achieve debt sustainability, and get the economy fully back on track in order to create and protect jobs, provide and enhance incomes, foster strong and inclusive growth led by exports, and restore hope to the Ghanaian people. Our domestic debt operation involves an exchange for new Ghana bonds with a coupon that steps up to 10% as soon as 2025, with zero interest in 2023, and a first interest payment in 2024, and longer average maturity for the bonds.
For 6 years, the doctrine Ghana Beyond Aid was one of the pillars of Nana Akufo-Addo's electoral rhetoric, who had made it the emblem of national sovereignty. The program, launched in 2018 and designed to win the country, a major exporter of cocoa, gold and oil, of international aid, seemed to be bearing fruit. In 2019, and with great fanfare, the president ended the agreement signed with the IMF by his predecessor, John Mahama, and solemnly promised that the country had at last secured its economic independence. But how did Ghana get to its present predicament? Ghana's debt continued to grow, standing at 78% of gross domestic product GDP, compared to 62.5% 5 years ago. In a bid to address its challenges, the government tried to beef up its fiscal policy by introducing a controversial e-levy tax on electronic transactions and to cut public spending, including by reducing the number of ministers, without much success. Ghana is facing multiple financial and economic challenges and has requested a $3 billion bailout from the International Monetary Fund to help it restore macroeconomic stability. By the end of February 2023, the Ghanaian government announced the successful settlement and conclusion of Ghana's Domestic Debt Exchange Program, DDEP. This is further expected to accelerate Ghana's engagement with external creditors. but the downgrade due to its decision to stop all payment to investors in the fixed income market still hovers over the West African nation. The earnest dispensation of the IMF facility and improved commodity sales could ease the risk and improve its financial challenges. Perpetua Fasami Peter for News Central.
Thank you for staying with us. Now, that was a report by Perpetua Fasami Peter on Ghana's present, economic standing. Not exactly since independence, but in recent days. Now, joining us to discuss this is News Central's, I wouldn't say correspondent, but our own colleague here in News Central, Kemini Amano. Kemini, what's that greeting Kemini said?
Moye.
Moye.
Yes, Moye.
Nyachumika.
Yeah, that's the response.
Earlier, I taught you to say Mochumi. Mochumi is when it's one person. When it's only Bernard responded. But because there are two of you, I have to pluralize it, which is Nyachumika. And that's Dangbe in Ghana.
Oh, okay.
That's good.
We are cousins of the Gans. I'm sure you know the Gans.
Yes, of course we are. I remember the language. I just forgot to write it down.
I mean, I really had
That's
no
all
idea,
right.
I needed to know that. So thanks for educating me on your language, especially the beautiful culture of Ghana. I mean, Ghana has a long-standing, dispute with Nigeria when it comes to the popular jollof. And it's even surprising because it's not just those two countries that have the jollof rice. And we also hear that Ghana is one of the peaceful countries in Africa, most peaceful countries in Africa. I don't know how true that is, and that's why we have you here. So once again, happy independence to you, Kemini Amano. I know we still have our long-standing fight from Village Square, and you're here on RDA. So, I mean, maybe we're going to...
No, let me finish that. You know, I was saying that we should celebrate our independence every time. And when you think about it, on the eve of independence, when Osajifo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah made one of his famous speeches, he said that the independence of Ghana was meaningless unless it was connected to the independence of the rest of Africa. And so Ghana was the gateway through which the rest of Africa walked through for independence. And so if you think about it, just a little bit more, every time that any African country celebrates its independence, that is some people will say homage, but that is homage to Ghana's own independence. So every month, in October, when Nigeria celebrates its independence, it's also Ghana's independence. So, yeah, I'm so right.
Nicely put.
And blessings, I'm right.
I would have, been able to just be humble to listen to Kemini, but I hear a lot of pride in that, in what you're saying. You're just so excited and you're rubbing it in. But anyways, thanks for letting us know once again.
If you were running for governor, I'd have voted for you.
Yes, please.
I will not.
Which state would you have given me?
In Nigeria or in Ghana?
Well, in Ghana, we don't have the federal system in Ghana.
Exactly.
We have just the whole country system. The singular, there's a name for it, I don't remember right now. I'm not going to go into it.
All right, anyway, lady
system.
and gentlemen, let's get into it. So first of all, let's talk about the governance in Ghana over the years. How do you think that Ghana's governance and public policy have evolved over time?
I think it's been checkered. When you consider public policy as a contract between the government and the people, I would say that it has been a 70-30 relationship over the years. Why am I saying that? We're paying more taxes now, which is our part of that contract. When you compare the number of taxes we're paying now to 1966, they are not the same. The value is not even the same. But when you look at the value for which we get for paying those taxes, the side of the contracts that the governments that have come and gone should have done, it does not match. It's not at par. And it would seem that we have given more and received less. When you go back a little, education was better back then. Education now does not have the same quality. People went to the university for free back then. People had quality accommodation. People had quality food provided by the universities back then. Something they are always proud to say. But guess what? Those people are the same people who are in offices now, have taken offices in the past, and they were not able to sustain that kind of education they received in times past. for the young people now. Young people like me who are now parents, who are also having children. And so it goes on and on. It's the same with healthcare. There was once a time that people in our geographical region will go to Ghana for healthcare. It is not the same because the health system or the healthcare system has deteriorated over the years. So it's a 70-30 affair, if I'm generous at all.
And I think it's also the same with maybe education, because I remember back in the 80s, did I just reveal something? Back in the years, there used to be a lot of influx of Ghanaian teachers coming into Nigeria back then. It was a popular thing to have teachers of Ghanaian origin teaching Nigerian children, because there was the belief that, and it wasn't just a belief, I think it was factual then, that education from Ghana or in Ghana was quite top notch. But then
Absolutely.
again, but then again, I'm going to say that it's not peculiar to, it's not unique to Ghana alone, right? These things you've mentioned, these deteriorations that you've talked about in terms of healthcare, education, almost everything you mentioned, it's also replicated in other sub-Saharan African countries.
Indeed.
So I'm guessing that just as Ghana paved the way to independence for other African countries.
Now I get where you're going with that point.
Just maybe the ills of independence that may have come with Ghana also percolated down to other sub-Saharan African countries, don't you think?
No, but you see, and that's a discussion we have had in private before. The fact that our problems on the continent are the same. However, we have failed as a continent to realize that and find a harmonized solution to that. So each of us will meet at the table, have the talk shop, and then go and try to implement it individually. And that's what hasn't helped us. Even if we had tried to solve our problems at the regional level, so we have ECOWAS, we have SADC, we have those in East Africa as well, and they were solving their problems at the regional level, I'm sure that the continent will be better off than it is right now. We continue to forget that before the colonizers came in, we were not Africa, but we were people who lived amongst ourselves harmoniously, so to speak. We were people who understood that our existence is made possible because the other person existed.
I get you. Now let's quickly talk about the theme for this year's celebration, Kemina. The theme is our unity, strength, and purpose. What do you think should be the top priority for Ghana's government in terms of public policies, in the coming years?
Well, first, I think we should talk about the theme for this year's celebration. I think it's very apt. When you look at our very recent history, there's been a lot of bigotry in Ghana. People wouldn't admit to it, but there's one tribe that is finding itself more important than the rest of the tribes in Ghana. There's one ethnic group that is having its own superiority complex, finding itself more important than the others. There are, the global problem of men who are finding themselves more important than the women of Ghana. There is also the fact that the people in the southern part of the country think they are more important, they should be more prioritized than the people of the north in the country. And if you understand the socioeconomic outlay of Ghana, you'd know that people of the north are not necessarily on the macroeconomic scale, are not necessarily well-to-do like people of the south. That division has also existed and has come to the fore in the national discourse in very recent history. And so I think that the theme was well picked. We have had an issue with the strand. Look at the economic status of the country at the moment. It's nothing to write home about. And then both of those things feed into what our purpose has been the last 4 years, the last 8 years, the last 12 years. And so it's a very important theme that they picked. Whether or not the government, the president more directly spoke to those issues, we'll leave it for another debate. But let's talk about, the second part of your question that seeks to address some of the things that the government should look at. I think that the government has failed to make sure that the Ghanaian people are put at the top of the list. The government has failed to make sure that what existed as the gap between the haves and have-nots was not narrowed, but rather widened. And so the rich have become richer and the poor have become poorer. Those who have abundant have sunk deeper on that scale of abandonment. And it's a shame for that country.
All right, I mean, Kemini, speaking about the divisions that exist and that have existed, and talking about prioritization of the people and, you know, that gap that has existed, how do you think, in your own opinion, that the government can ensure that public policies are inclusive and beneficial to all citizens, regardless of your socioeconomic status, your geographic location, your ethnic group, whatever it is?
Well, first of all, the people within the government must stop the bigotry. We have had very poor remarks from people in government. Now, if you hold a public office or a civil office, we shouldn't hear you say certain things. But more directly to your question, Ghana's constitution, one of the fantastic things that we have as a country, enshrined within it is an affirmative action for everybody, which dictates that every citizen of the country should be carried along. But what have we seen over the years? Young people have been left behind. People with disability have been left behind. Women have been left behind. Ghana's affirmative action bill has been on the desk of Parliament for a very long time now, 7 years if I'm correct. Nothing has been done about it. And so if government wants to do something, they need to bring back the social interventions, those things that provided for the vulnerable. Ghana has a policy, I'm not sure if it's a law, but it has a policy to ensure that all public buildings are people with disability friendly. What did we see? There was a sham of an implementation and then nothing happened after that. We want to see that implemented so that when people with disability go to public buildings to access services, they do not struggle. They are not abandoned in the hot sun at the entrance. We need the government to go back to the affirmative action bill. Make sure that it is passed. Make sure that the concession it gives women is done so that women can have their place in public office as well. We need the government to make sure that the right to information bill, which for some reason people think is just for journalists. It's not only for journalists. If it's properly applied, you as a citizen of Ghana will not be left behind when information is passed around. When your money is spent, you can go to the government, you can go to the agency and ask, how did you use my money? And you would have the information. The government should not find ways around the RTI law and deny the Ghanaian people of the information that they need to know about how their tax monies are being spent. Not only monies, but how they are being governed as a people.
You know, but my next question was going to be, what exactly is the Ghanaian government getting wrong? But you've given quite a potpourri of what the government is getting wrong. Now, last year, we know that there were several protests across Ghana, and, you know, woes and people have actually been clamoring and demanding for change, which is why I was going to ask you, what exactly is the government getting wrong? But as I said earlier, you have given a lot of clarity as to several things that have gone wrong and that the government has gotten wrong. Now, my question is going to, okay, go ahead, Blessings.
I mean, we talk about what the government is getting wrong, and I would just like for us to talk about what they can do right.
Exactly.
I mean, you have mentioned some of the things that they probably should take cognizance of, but what are other things that you think the government can pay attention to? You know,
but before you answer that, I also want to ask, is the government getting anything right at the moment? And having said that, then I jump to what Blessings has said. What can they get right at this point?
Listen, from the beginning of this administration, one of the things that I had spoken about was the government's vision of digitizing, or as they like to say, digitalizing the governance process was amazing. At that time, the fault there was that they were not carrying the people along. Fast forward to now, I realized that they have the vision, but what they failed at is going about executing that vision. Let me give you an example. The government of Ghana came up with a very fantastic idea of naming our streets and giving us digital IDs so it would make it easy for apps like Google Maps to pick up on that information. And if somebody was coming to your house, they could easily find you. Or if somebody was sending you a letter through the postal service, they could easily do that. Ask me where that project is now. We don't know. You know, we spent a lot of money on that. We don't know how useful it has been because we failed to carry the Ghanaian public along on that project. I don't know how many people still use that app in Ghana. I don't use it. I don't recall that I ever put it on any form anywhere, and it was actually useful for the process. And so the government did have that vision right of digitalizing the governance process in Ghana. However, its execution, as we know now, in my opinion, has been abysmal. So if you could just remind me the second part of the question so I wrap up quickly on this one.
Well, basically, is the government getting anything right at all? In your opinion, what would you say the government is getting right?
That's what I mentioned. They did get that right.
Yes.
But they trailed off at some point with execution. On the economic front, you know, what can they do to make things right? On the economic front, imagine, think of Ghana as a company, right? As New Central. And you pump a lot of money into it, but you don't get any output. You have gone past that window period when you're supposed to make your fixes and then start to make money. You don't get the money. What you do then is that you go and borrow more to be able to
keep up.
You're thinking that once you borrow, you could put it into good use, and then you can pay back all that you have done and still be sustainable as a business. In Ghana's case, we have been able to borrow a lot of money, but we haven't been able to put it into good use because what we did was rob Peter to pay Paul. And that is where we are right now on the economic front. It's the reason that we don't have vaccines in the country. They won't admit it. It's the reason we don't have vaccines for children in the country at the moment. And I wish they will admit that they have mismanaged the entire process of vaccine acquisition. They have mismanaged our monies and they cannot go and get us more. But they won't. And we're there. People will justify it. And, you know, I could go on and on.
I know. Well, Kemini, honestly, just before we let you go, I'd like to say here again that a lot of what you have talked about is similar to many other sub-Saharan African countries. We're seeing lack of transparency in government. We're seeing lack of inclusion of the people in government and in governance. We're seeing mismanagement of funds when it comes to the economy. We're seeing projects that have been abandoned. Again, it seems like Africa is one big country. And, you know, with similar problems, similar challenges, and maybe in some parts also, will I say, similar achievements, as a matter of fact, because almost everything we deal with is similar. Well, we can only hope that someday soon, the African continent will eventually rise and become great again.
I hope so.
I mean, these are very serious issues that you raised, especially Kemini, and thank you for raising them. And let me just say, I like the passion with which you spoke, and it makes me reconsider my position about electing you governor should the opportunity present itself. Thank you once again for joining us,
I look forward to that.
Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure was all mine.
Okay.
Well, I mean, there it is. Like I said, they're very serious issues that she raised. And I mean, it would be good if the government can look into these things, because that's like basically what Ghanaians want from the government. I mean, every country celebrates everyone celebrates their country, their culture when the time comes. But at the end of the day, we need to face the problems and tackle it if we can. If it's something that can be changed, then it should be changed. I mean,
I couldn't agree more, definitely. Like we were talking about last year, Ghanaians had several protests, and these were some of the issues that they were protesting against, you know, poor governance, lack of inclusion of people in governance and in government matters, education, funding. Basically, almost everything that she mentioned were the things that were on the table. And as I mentioned, they are similar to different things happening in several African countries. So definitely, we do hope that the African countries and the African continent in total will get it right eventually.
Hopefully so. Well, you're still watching Report Desk Africa right here on News Central Television.